We have so many stories in our lives, but our stories are not always heard. On the Hear My True Story podcast, we tell our own true stories.
Before the white car backed, our head teacher had scattered. Looking at him, I could only see his tie that was flying backwards, waving at us, and he disappeared in thin air.
I want to share my life story. I want to share my voice with the people because I know that just a small joke I can tell through this podcast, it will make someone smile.
When you ask me what I fear most in life, I would definitely respond to you and say it's fear itself.
We are fighting for togetherness. We are fighting for equal rights. We are fighting to end injustice.
You don't have to be a storyteller or writer because, guess what? Life writes the best stories.
Hear my true story.
So, what I wanted to bring on board, I'm not giving up. The language of this control, I realize that being a creative or using creative arts, actually, we're the right move. We just need to control.
Okay, I get that. I get that how the creative arts can really be used to promote our language, African languages. But just the point still stays that power equals to language, and the Europeans have used language to exploit Africa.
This is your favorite time of the week with your number one podcast.
Hear my true story.
Yeah, our dear listeners, welcome back again this week on Hear My True Story podcast. It is me, your host, Otako, and I'm really always so happy to have you guys every week to follow my wonderful podcast. This is Hear My True Story, and I'm Otako, your host. And what a wonderful week. Yeah, this time is going to be so grateful. We are going to have a wonderful show, a wonderful conversation with young artists here who have been doing wonderful work here in Germany. Some of them are school teachers, others are already doing training. It's quite so beautiful. So anyway, because Hear My True Story, we share our personal stories and we always share conversations, and we hope that you guys enjoy or learn something from our wonderful conversations. What is happening in today's episode? We are going to dive into a wonderful conversation, which is really going to focus on language, but more especially how European languages have been used to really exploit or exclude out other people because of not speaking their languages.
This week's special guest on your favorite podcast.
Hear my true story.
Yeah, my friend, you are welcome. It is the first time to have this wonderful guest on the podcast, and I would like you to maybe introduce yourself. You can say your name, what you do, and so that people get to know who is behind the wonderful microphone and talking to them.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
My name is Timothy. Just as he said, it's my first time. And I've been through doing trainings and volunteership. But I'll be glad to share my knowledge with the listeners as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is so nice to be with you here, Timothy.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So you have only one name, just like that, Timothy?
Quite a number of them.
Uh-huh.
I prefer Timothy Patrick.
Timothy Patrick. Okay. All those are English names, my friend. Don't you have your let me say you come from Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a Ugandan name?
Yeah.
And what is the Ugandan name?
I identified Ofono.
Ofono. Yeah. I love that name. That's a wonderful name.
For sure.
So would you like me to call you Ofono in the conversation, or would you like to be called Timothy?
I would prefer Timothy.
Oh, Timothy. Wonderful. And I'm called Otako, and I would prefer to be called Otako. Yeah, I'm also from Uganda. So I'm really happy to have you, Timothy, on this wonderful podcast. Is it the first time for you to be on a podcast?
Yeah, it is my first time. Probably the listener would also testify.
Yeah. I can really understand, but you have a wonderful voice for the microphone. You know what? Something really came up in my mind for the first time when I was on a podcast. My first time, I listened to my voice, and I couldn't believe that I have a voice that is good for podcasting. Though at first I was scared to listen to it because I didn't like my voice. But after many times listening to it, I started loving my voice. And I think also my listeners love this wonderful voice. It is perfect for podcasting. That's what I always say. I give myself this positive.
And thumbs up.
Yeah. Yes. So in the studio, again, we have another guest who has been on this wonderful podcast for some time. And you have been listening to him. He's an artist. I think he's going to introduce himself again. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure. Again, it's me, Edwin Matovo. I've been here, and I'm always here, and I will be here today and tomorrow, and the next year I'll be here. This is my home. Thank you for always inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edwin Matovo, for joining us on this wonderful podcast. So we have three guys on the podcast. So, Edwin Matovo, do you want to remind the listeners, are you a musician, or are you an artist, or you are a school teacher, or you are a class teacher?
Actually, I do a lot of things. My professional right now, what I'm doing in Germany, I work in a school. I'm an educator, and I also do music. I do dance. I'm like all around. What I can say, I'm an artist.
You are all rounder. You are an artist.
I'm an artist.
So, you guys, today we are talking about language. How European languages are being used to exclude certain people when you come to Europe as an African expat, or maybe an African migrant, or maybe someone who's deciding to not to live in Africa, or maybe not to live in Asia, and decide to move to Europe. Wherever you go, it could be Germany, it could be Spain, it could be France, it could be any other country. But then the language issue still comes up. And here in Europe, there's already a structure that when you come to Europe, there's a level of language that you have to be speaking. Either you are A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. Yes, there's that level of language. And this level is in all language. It could be in German, it could be in Spanish, it could be in French, it could be in English. So this come to you as a migrant, and the society or the system requires you to learn their language when you come to Europe. So here today, before we go into this discussion, deep into it, I want to hear your personal experiences. How was it? How is it for you guys? I mean, maybe our listeners would like to know, what is your experience with you guys learning a new language, for example, German, because you're living in Germany. Timo, what is your experience? You actually, our dear listeners, Timo speaks a lot of languages. Maybe you can tell our listeners, how many languages do you speak?
In total, I speak a total of 8 languages.
Oh my God.
Well, these languages, my parents are all multilingual, and I grew up also having this passion for languages. Of course, the community also affected my learning, because I grew up in Nepalese barracks where there are lots of people from different ethnic groups, and there you start to learn.
You don't go to school. You just
no.
You just learn from the community.
Yeah, from scratch.
So as a kid, you started speaking 8 languages.
I had to learn.
How many languages do your parents speak?
My mom can go to about 5.
And your father?
My dad is more lesser than 5.
Okay.
3, I can say.
Yeah, of course, Timo. I know you speak 8 languages. Yeah. You know, our dear listeners, Uganda has over 50 languages. And Timo speaks 8 out of 50. That you are really perfect. And which languages are these? You could tell our listeners to know what kind of languages are these that you specifically speak.
I speak Dopadola, I speak Luganda, I speak Soga, I speak Langi, I speak Alur, I speak Acholi, I speak then German.
German.
Well, it's more than 8. More than 8, yeah, sure.
More than 8,
yeah,
plus English.
English and German, it's more than 8.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then what's your experience with learning German, European language? What makes you really... Do you have a story you can share about speaking German language?
Speaking German is quite a journey. When we say German as it, well, it's not as it sounds. It's also learning from the counting, just as a kid, learning the letters from the alphabet, from the first one to the last. And that is the journey of it. I had to go to a school. It started with the motivation because I had future plans on how I wanted to spend the rest of my vacation. I thought volunteering was good, and looking into the aspect, I had to learn the language before because that was one of the requirements. I enrolled in the school. Of course, I started on for about 2 good months and a half learning the basics
of the German language. And then you decided to come to German to do your volunteer service.
And then decided to come here.
What is the difference from learning it from Uganda and then you arrive here in German and it's really... it is a language that is now not just basic.
Well, for those who have not experienced surprises, it's one of the surprises one can ever have in life.
What is your surprise then?
Now reaching here, and I thought, maybe I wasn't learning German. Maybe it was something else. I got to know Timothy. You just don't understand anything. It's beyond. I just realized what I learned within the walls of the classroom wasn't actually the real thing that I needed to experience. So I came to a conclusion, by the way.
And what was the conclusion that you came to?
It's a lot of hard work.
And then I go back to my friend here, Matovu. Should I call you Herr Matovu? Should I call you Mr. Matovu? Or should I call you Edwin?
Whatever name you call me, all are my names.
All are your names. So, my friend, your experience with learning languages, you speak more than one language, that I know.
Actually, I'm so terrible with the languages. My head does not really function very well with learning languages. I'm really terrible. And yeah, I can speak I think 2 languages I can say I'm fluent with. And that's my mother tongue language. That's Luganda and English I'm trying. And then right now I'm trying to learn Dutch up to now.
And what is your experience with learning Dutch, learning the German language?
Actually, to the environment we grew up in, learning a language wasn't more in this academic format. So it was like, as Timur said before, but it was kind of learning in society where your aunties, where the kids you stay with, you play with, who come from different backgrounds, different tribes, you try to catch up with the language. And then reaching to the point when I want to travel to Germany, then they came this academic kind of certificate qualification to have, like of a German certificate. And of course it was kind of a surprise that I have to go to school to study a language, to learn it, and to have really a qualified certificate which is verified that I speak the language. In Uganda, it wasn't my case. I was just learning English as in school, and Uganda I grew up learning. So it wasn't easy, and by that time then I got to realize actually that I don't have any talent in learning languages, because I try to read books, I try to listen to kind of podcast or watching movies to understand the language. Because I remember as I was still learning, our teacher used to say that every person, individual, has a way good of learning a language. Sometimes some people learn by reading, others learn by listening, others learn by observing. And I've tried there and then to find my way of learning language. But actually, maybe, I don't know, but maybe because really I don't have like a full passion of learning language. It's not my thing really at all. And my passion is in another field. That's why I think one of the reasons which makes me like learning language, a new language, very, very difficult. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, like, I can really understand myself. I speak more than one language, as I mentioned to Timo, more than one language. But what I find about learning the German language, when I moved here to German, from just like Timo, what he talked about, we learned in Uganda, we went to the Goethe Institute in Kampala, where you learn the German language. Yeah. And there you are learning A1, A2. And then because I moved to German to do my volunteer service, and then I found a surprise that this language is not what I just learned in Uganda. And then I'm in a surprise. And then what makes it hard for me was the society, the community, if they are willing for me to be accepted because I don't speak the language. Yes, I'm in a community where I speak the German that is not right, and then people are like, yeah, it's okay, it's fine. Yeah. The community accepts you. They accept that maybe you're not good in the language, that's not your mother tongue. Yeah. But the system is not going to accept you. That's where I found myself difficult to learn the language. From my personal experience, the community I was living in, they accepted me. They could really like to speak to me. They could encourage me to speak the German language. And I was improving all the time. At the same time, I was taking classes, A1, A2, moving to B1, B2, then C1, then C1, yeah. And then I'm at this level when I was studying the language and also learning it from the community. But the system was denying me that chance.
Mm-hmm. As in, I'm not sorry to ask. Are you saying that the environment here, that the people, the Germans here, were like supporting you, understanding that you're learning the language? They don't ask me any question. But the system, what do you mean really by the system? Sorry to ask.
What I mean by the system is that as I was learning the German language, I could talk to the people in the community.
Okay.
When I speak to someone and they hear me saying, okay, hello, guten Morgen, ich bin der Otako, ich möchte helfen, ich habe nicht heute hier gemacht und was kann ich machen jetzt? You know, trying to learn this German of asking food, yeah. Ich möchte essen, ich weiß, this simple language. People could listen to me. Yeah. And then the system is that if I want to take a training, they could tell me, okay, yeah, it's okay, but you need a certificate that proves you that you can speak this language. Okay. And this certificate comes with you taking a class, and the classes are expensive. And to pass that exam, it's not that everyone can pass the exam. You get that? So the system pushes you out because you don't have the certificate of the language. Okay. It pushes you out. However much you're speaking English or you speak 8 languages, like what Timo said, he speaks 8 languages more than the German people here who speak 1 language, maybe German and English, or maybe German and French. But they push you out. The African languages are not seen as languages to the system. You get that? That's what really pushed me out. That's really made me like not wanting to learn the German language, because I felt like all my years I've learned English, all my years I've learned all these other languages from my country, Africa. But they have no value in entire life. The system doesn't see that as a skill. You're speaking more than 1 language. It's okay, but these are not European languages. They will take you to be serious if you're speaking more than 2 European languages. You speak Spanish, you speak Portuguese, you speak German, then you speak French. They'll say, wow, you're speaking so many languages. But when you come, you're speaking African languages, they'll say, yeah, we don't understand these languages. You understand? That's where I find the system pushing us out, because we are not speaking the European languages.
Okay, kind of a superiority complex coming in.
What do you mean by superiority complex? Or complex?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, actually, it's a pity, and because language, to me, language and speech it's something which gives like we human beings something which we use to express ourselves, something which is beyond just a language, but something which helps us to identify ourselves. And I find it really pity. And for me, I take it like being just an ignorant, saying that someone who doesn't speak the language from Europe or that is not linguistic, because you try it out. You go to African country, go to Ghana, go to Zimbabwe, try to learn their language, and then you come back and you tell me if that is is it a language or not? Because all their languages, but that comes in because of the system. I think, this is my opinion, I think this comes up with the kind of a system of control. That there are people who feel like they have to control others and using it like what you do is not good, better than what we do. Because who determines which language is superior, which language is not? In that complex, I see it, it's really being narrow and being ignorant. If you can say my motor spark, like Luganda, it's not a language. And
no, let me ask you. You're living here in Germany, yeah? You met people and they ask you how many languages you speak. This goes to you, Matov. Then I'll go to Timo.
Okay.
And then you tell them you speak these 8 languages from Africa.
Yeah.
What is their reaction?
Oh, well, of course, their reaction will be like, "Oh, wow!" Of course, many people are faced like they are really pretenders. They go, "Wow, that's a lot. You speak. How can you do this? Oh, this you so. How do you do this?" But actually, in their heads, they are not seeing it that much. But when you talk about the so known languages in Europe, of course, as you say, German, English, Spanish, French, and name it. Because we're dealing in the system. This is a European system. And of course, they think not only the language, but of course, when you see in the other fields, they are soccer. If you're talking to the soccer fields, and you say I play football from Uganda, and people playing soccer in Germany, of course, yours will not be considered, So I think it's beyond on the language. That's why I use the other word, the superiority complex, that because the economy, they are big, they are controlling actually. They are in control. So whatever they do, whatever it is, they set standards in this kind of aspect. So whatever it is, even if it is food, even if it's clothing, even if it's design, being creative, you can see, even if you're creative, like, sorry to drive you along, but when I'm ready, I talk.
I know. I listen to you. I listen to you. Yeah. Sometimes I don't like to cut someone because they may be having really relevant information.
Actually, you can say, we understand you, and because sometimes I bring more examples because my head is always broken.
Okay, so are you done right now?
No, actually, what I wanted to say, but is that when you look into the thing, it is in this kind of, we are in control. People who set standards. So if you don't belong to the people who set standards, what you do, it will not matter. That's what I can say.
Power.
Yes, power.
So language equals to power. So Timo, you speak more than one language. You speak over 5 African languages from different ethnic groups in Africa, East Africa, Uganda. When you meet a German person here in Germany and you tell them, yeah, I speak more than 8 languages and it is on your CV and they read these languages, does that really impact does it make change to your life here living in Germany? Do people really appreciate that when they hear that from you?
One thing I've got to know here, I've always been questioned. Yeah, so how many languages do you speak? I've been glad to share with them and tell them, and maybe if out of curiosity someone would also ask and want to know what languages and where they are from. So I'll go out naming one by one. Some of course, they are surprised, and some are like, okay, African languages. So it's not magic.
Yeah, because the African languages, and you know what's really annoying when someone says to you, because me, like as a black person in a class that is more a majority of people from other countries, and I happen to be the only person from Africa in the entire class. So when they speak, someone looks at us and says, yeah, so someone is sharing some African language. Yet there's no African language, and I cannot share that. But when I talk about I speak more languages from Africa, someone, oh, wow, cool, good. But that does not add a plus in my living in Germany.
Neither does it to any foreign person here. I've myself written my CV down. I think the only language I've included among the languages I know is Swahili. But when we go around, try to ask themselves, how many languages do you know? Like, bounce the question back. The answer is quite obvious.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because people from Africa will speak more languages.
Yeah, sure.
And what really makes me feel so sad is that our languages don't have the power. Because just like Matov said, language equals to power, superiority. Which language speaks, which language runs the globe. Here we are speaking this podcast in English. But when I speak something in Luganda, I need to translate to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I supposed to do that? Because I was forced as a small kid that language that really runs the globe system is English. But then when I come to Germany, they tell me, no, you need to learn German if you are to live here in Germany. Then I'm in this area where I have to learn another European language. And at the end of the day, I end up speaking more than one European language, which is not even my mother tongue language. And when I go back to Uganda, I'm judged by the European language. Someone will judge me of my academic level when they hear that I speak more than one European language. This is true. You go to Uganda and tell them, do you speak English? And tell them you don't speak English. You say, wow, you are not educated.
What kind of person?
Yeah, you see? So also us in Africa, we level our academic level by the languages that we speak. Yeah, Matov here, he has been telling us about how he does his work, but still you bring songs and music with African languages in it. And then people are like, oh, okay, that's nice. But what's the meaning of some of these languages? Because they don't have the power. That's why we can't sell African languages. We have Swahili. Swahili is spoken in East Africa. But I have so many young people that go to East Africa to do their volunteer services from Germany or maybe from Britain or maybe from the US. They don't care, some of them, to learn Swahili. Because we don't ask them that you to live in East Africa, you need to know Swahili. And when I come to German and I say I speak Swahili, and people are like, what is that? It is an East African official language. Maybe, Matov, you can add something on that. But this makes me feel so sad.
Yeah, actually, when you were talking about this topic, it came to my mind that there was a big topic in Uganda by the artists questioning themselves, what do they need to do to make their music cross borders, and came to the point what one of presenters and one of the musicians were saying, because we are using our native language, that's Lusoga, that's Luganda, that other people outside the globe doesn't understand. And there was kind of a question of how the Nigerians are doing it, because Nigerians right now are doing really good in Afro beats, in Afro house music. And now, if you really have time to listen to the music, what's happening now, it has influenced even the European music. You hear big artists also coming to their tracks. What I'm trying to bring right now here, that I think we need to start also believing in ourselves as Ugandans, as Africans in general, and to try to use the creativity, because in creative, nothing can stop something which is creative, because something which is creativity is spiritual, and spiritual doesn't talk to religions, doesn't talk to the tribes. It doesn't matter where you come from. Artistic things, that's why you see anything like music, anything like any kind of innovations, that is creativity, comes out. The first question is not from which tribe does this creative thing come from, but you hear the soul, people are just connected to it. And because these are just the bodies and we're just separated by the countries we come from, these are the boundaries which we are just created artificially. But since we are all human beings and we come from above, if you all can agree with that, creativity, it is beyond control. So I think it's now evident that we could use our creative arts to gain our control, to pass information, to make the ignorant people actually understand who we are. That's why I'm really happy right now that the Afrobeats, Afro House is influencing the whole world, and I see many people are open-minded, joining in. And why am I talking about this? The topic is language. I'm not going far from the music. It's language. When you hear Nigerians, they have what they call pidgin English. Actually,
You mean pidgin English?
no, pidgin.
Pidgin?
Yeah?
Pidgin.
Pidgin, yeah, pidgin English.
Yeah, huh.
Yeah, to say. It's English, but they twist it in their local accent. So they make it kind of sound different. And sometimes when they hit these beats, you find they're singing English, it's not English, and also they put many local languages in their songs. But because of the beats, because of the creativity of the music, I was in the club last month. I hear Germans singing the whole songs of these Nigerians, like Burna Boy. And for me, I was like, what's going on here? It was a kind of surprise, because at first it was we reverse, singing Celine Dion songs. And now I'm really witnessing the opposite, that we Africans are also, these people also can do this. So what I wanted to bring on board, like, I'm not giving up. The language of this control, I realize that being a creative or using creative arts, actually, we're the right move. We just need to control.
Okay, I get that. I get that how the creative arts can really be used to promote our language, African languages. But just the point still stays that power equals to language, and the Europeans have used language to exploit Africa. And now we have a new African disease coming that is exploiting Africa. That's Chinese. Chinese people coming to Africa and teaching African children Chinese and naming them Chinese names, because they realized we can't do anything in Africa, but if we don't teach the Africans Chinese, we shall not be able to control Africa.
Enjoying this episode? Leave a review now.
Hear my true story.
I was punished as a kid for not speaking good English. I don't know if any of you experienced this, but this was me. I was punished.
For all my school years, I've been punished.
Then I moved to Germany as an adult.
And it becomes a punishment.
I was punished. I was punished for not speaking good German when I moved to Germany. How was I punished? I almost lost my school. The school told me that we shall cancel your school if you don't have a C1 German level. I was stressed just because I don't have a C1 German level. I did study the German from A1, A2, B1, B2, C1. And I was so unlucky that every time I was sitting this exam of C1, I was failing it. I failed it the first time, I only passed oral. I failed the second time. I failed the third time. I met the school institution. I told them I've failed. And they told me, okay, since you have failed, you cancel your year so that you go back and you stop your training. When you get the C1, we shall keep the space for you. When you get the C1, then you can continue. However much I was doing in class very well, however much I was doing good work at my workplace, the C1 was going to make me to stop my training. I started hating myself because I don't pass the C1 level of German. I even hated my mother tongue language because I saw it is useless that I'm speaking it. It can't take me anywhere. I even hated English because I was punished in school, but it does not make any change when I'm in German and I can't speak the German language.
Well,
that's the punishment, you see. You go on.
I've also had my own share on not being able to speak the language in its wholeful, rightful way. With my past hirer, they thought, no, you can't continue to stay here. You can go out there, make the experiences, and once you've made the experiences, you can choose to come back. But in the sense that I go, perfect the language, and then come back. But, it's a language. I speak more than one or two. It's all, they've all been a journey. It just doesn't happen all in one day. Neither is my immediate mother tongue, Jap, the Padola. I didn't learn it on the very day I was born.
Yeah.
It was a step, but that's not what people sit down and think. But also, we also realized in between that the Germans themselves can't write the proper thing, but they survive. They also speak. I speak with people. I try to engage myself in talks on a daily basis, conversations, and do whatever. But then somehow in the class, doing my grammar, I realize, this is what a colleague of mine just said, and I learned it from them. I thought this is right. And then the teacher is telling you, that's wrong. And this is the rightful way.
I mean, I understand your point is that someone firing you from a job because of the language, it doesn't make sense when you're speaking.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we come in this Germany and we speak the language in 2-3 years. They cannot speak our Muttersprache. They cannot speak our mother tongue languages. When they go back to our countries, maybe in Africa, they can't even say a word. But that's where I find it being a challenge, that the system, and the community, and the people around you can influence you to learn the language.
Yeah. I think this topic of the language, I find it really, 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 really grow. It's complex because when I look into sorry to take you this kind of far, our country, like Uganda, you said it before that we have all around 55 languages beyond, and when I look into German, they almost have one language, but of course with different dialects. I hear Hochdeutsch, I hear which kind of a Deutsch? Schwäbisch, and all in all, more 4 of which, but they have the Hochdeutsch, which is everyone can understand. So they have a language which unites them. But what comes back to Uganda? A small country like Uganda is having over 50 languages. And from language, most of the time, that is coming into divisions of this tribe, different cultures. So if you want to make something bigger, you want to progress, of course, everyone looks for unity. And for us, the language here, there are people who say, those people who speak Luganda, those people who speak Lusoga, name it. So we find ourselves that we are disunited because of the languages. And I'm just imagining if a country like Uganda had one language, just say one national language, to say which is really like recognized by the country. Like, name it Olusoga as the national language of Uganda. Of course, there's other languages, but everyone, like Lusoga, it is the national language we have. I have a feeling that we will be more united and we could be even more stronger to do many things which are impactful even on the global thing.
I want to stop you because, for example, East Africa, we have Swahili. But how many universities in Europe that offer Swahili language? I don't know. I've not made the research. Maybe you have made the research. How many East African countries that require a European before you either start anything in East Africa, you are required to have a certificate of East African language, which is called Swahili, of a certain level. Here in Germany, even to just get your citizenship as a German person in Germany, you need a B1, a level of German language. Yeah. In Uganda, people can change their citizenship to become Ugandans when they can't speak any language in Uganda. In Africa, it can't speak on the behalf of African continent, but I speak on behalf of Uganda. Europeans have become Ugandan citizens even when they can't speak any Ugandan language.
Actually, that one I can try to understand them, because when you see the system in Uganda doesn't bring the language on board, they are bringing many things on other things. Like in Uganda, we say English is the official language and it's the national language we use. And then comes the confusion of the East African language, which is Swahili, which is not impacted, which is not implemented in universities, in any kind of education. It's language which is just on paper. We don't see any impact, which means, but which comes to our question, what can we do to make, like, okay, as you said, Swahili as a East African language? Of course, Kenya and Tanzania, it's their language. And they are so proud. That's why Swahili is so strong in East Africa, in Africa in general. So if you ask any African about naming only 5 strong languages in Africa, you can't name. You cannot fail to name Swahili. That's why if that doesn't come first, it comes second, because Kenya, it is their national language. All Kenyans speak Swahili. All Tanzanians speak Swahili. You come to Uganda, then I don't know. You have to speak English if you want to be a Ugandan, educated, civilized.
In other words, in Uganda is meant for soldiers and policemen, huh? And for the local people, it's left out.
Yeah, I get that. But still, as before we end this first part of the conversation, because my next question is going to take us in the second segment of the conversation.
Well,
I would like you to conclude, and maybe you can also say bye to our dear listeners. In Swahili, maybe any language that you like.
Well,
or maybe, before we close, I think we can share with our listeners the wonderful, beautiful African languages that each of us speaks best by just saying one word, 2, 3, or something. And maybe you can also sing in that language, but no translating, so that we can show them the beauty of the multilingual people that are on this wonderful podcast today.
Well, before we close, I wanted to say this out. I've realized that Swahili is actually offered in the universities, but because children have been given this mentality in school, you need to learn a foreign language, English, French, German, Chinese. And at the end, you realize students doing international business at the university, they will choose Chinese over Swahili, French over Swahili.
Yeah, those are taught in Ugandan university, but I'm talking about globally. Which universities here in Europe that offer Swahili? I need to do my research. Maybe our listeners are aware of that. Yeah, sure. They can also inform us. Because, we are not talking as experts on this wonderful podcast, but we are sharing our experiences, our stories with learning the German language, because all of us, we live here in Germany. So we learn, we experience different things.
Sorry to ask, I hear people here studying African studies. What do they really study? We need to look into that.
Yeah.
Many people have had like friends doing a university Bachelor of African studies. What is that? We need to do research actually.
Yeah, I mean, I need to do personal research to know what kind of things happen there. But I'm really looking forward to seeing that Africa will become stronger. We make our languages so strong. Because of colonialism, that's why we have a problem of language. Colonialism used language. When the Spaniard came to Africa, they brought Spanish and they forced us to learn Spanish. When the Germans came to Africa, they forced us to learn German.
However, didn't succeed so much.
Yeah, and then when the English people came to Africa, they forced us to learn English. And then the Arabs came to Africa, they forced us to learn Arabic. Yeah, when the Portuguese came to Africa, they forced us to learn Portuguese. You see? And now, in 2020, in this century, Chinese people are coming to Africa and they are forcing Africans to learn Chinese. So, for that reason, before we end, our dear listeners, it has just been a wonderful freestyle conversation. So, I hope that you learned something from our experiences. Yeah, but before I conclude, I can tell you guys on the wonderful podcast, I managed to really pass my C1 exams, and I got my C1 certificate. Yeah, I got a C1 certificate of German, so I can speak some little German.
Actually, you're a professor now.
No. At least I have a paper that shows that, Otako, you can speak German. So, yeah, it's really annoying when you come to offices here in Germany. People ask you, show us that you can speak the German language. However much you're speaking to them in the German language, they'll say, we need a paper. So now the school is not going to chase me because of the German language. I got my C1. That's wonderful, and I'm happy for that. Yeah, that is my good news for you, my friends here on the...
When is the party? When is the party?
I don't need to do any party. Laughing is enough.
It was a battle, my friend. We need a battle. We need to cut a cake.
It was a battle. Let me tell you, people in Germany, if you can't speak German, they can make you suffer. I almost went into depression because of the language. But happy enough, good enough, I managed to go through it. So we are going to say bye unless someone has something really they want to share with the audience before we say bye.
Yeah, actually, what I would like to say about the languages, and just to conclude for now, because I have a lot of questions and suggestions in my mind as usual. But anyway, what I feel like we need to do, we as, I don't want to say more Africans, because Africans, it's a big continent, actually, it's the biggest.
Yeah, I mean, the languages from the African continent, to be clear.
Yeah. Let me just focus on kind of like East Africa, to join as we all say Swahili. I think we need to find a way of informing the people in power, the people from the communities, our parents. Let's start from the family basis, from our parents, the parents of today, of now, to show them that we are good with these native languages like Swahili, to try to bring this picture of when you learn Swahili, it's not like in Uganda, as we know, it's a language for soldiers. No, it's a language which is for us. This is our own. So this is our heritage, this is our culture, this is who we are. And if we could start from home, because from home, we come to communities. From communities, that's when we come to the people in power, because they come from communities. So I don't want to jump from family to say people in power, because people in power, they come from home. So we need to set, our duty as young parents, as most of my friends are right now. It's your responsibility to teach a daughter, to teach your son that Lusoga, Luganda, Swahili, it is part of them, and it identifies them. They have to feel proud of their languages, of where they come from, of their heritage, and to share and learn to share from others. Because for me, I have even friends who don't want to say their last names or their surnames, because they feel where they come from is they are inferior. Like our friends who come from, I don't want to name the tribes, but they don't want to share, to say their names. Reaching to that kind of a state. They are educated, they even have PhDs, but when you hear them, they don't want to mention there, It is it starts from there, starts from small. So we need to put these things at the point of nurturing kids. So it's Otako's responsibility, it is Matovi's responsibility, it is Mr. Ofono's responsibility that our kids, let them be part of the change. Thank you for allowing me to say this.
You are welcome. Yes, Timo, do you have anything before we conclude today's conversation about the language, before we move into this next segment of how colonialism has really impacted, how colonialism has affected us in terms of language? Do you have anything else to say before we close this segment?
I'll add on what Edrin said. Well, the language languages are not just languages. These are our identity in inheritance, and we should just keep them on. The parents shouldn't leave the children to go learn it from the society. It makes it even harder for them to learn. Rather, it has to start from the real center of the human life, home. I grew up with my parents, but they made it sure the first thing I do in life is to learn my language. And after I had learned that, I could go out, learn other languages. Because out there, my parents didn't come from central Uganda. They came from the eastern. But they made it sure I had to learn my language. Then I can go out, learn others. And that is how I learned these other languages. I knew I had to find a medium to communicate with others. If it found me in the northern part, which language can I speak there? So time doesn't wait. Once opportunity is there, learn.
Wow, that's really true. We need to learn our language and appreciate them. However much the Europeans use their language to oppress us, to suppress our languages, we should not take their languages to be the superiority. So for that reason, I want to ask you guys, in your mother tongues, you can speak the language, say something. We are not going to translate for our listeners what we have said in our language. We want them to test the art of language. So maybe Ofono can start, then comes to Otako, and then it goes to Matovo. Yeah.
Well, I'll start off with my very best, and that's my real mother tongue. Amito foyo jumaju winjo duonda je gi medo poyo joni dhoko bedo gima duong tek ikwa padhan. Kubedo ni dhok kende to nono gi piny mere jiema dhano riperoni ang'i. Meno angir ma wanyalo meny rok gine gi nyuth rok ni aja nono me ma kuma wuokie kware ana ng'adi ni to ka wakinyale bende unubedi gi marach wacho na aja padhola tikinyal wacho ikinyal luodhu padhola paki wacho ikinyal titore dhano ni agimi luama dhombi ye kada dhudhoki obedo gima duong chungoru gima wanwango kuma watie ka ni dhudhok pajo kinyuoge dhudhok megi ile wachori ni gikisoma pere dhudhok pajo is how they identify mena gima junyuth regene. They won't tell you, yeah, we are Germans, But now you speak English and we will integrate you in our system. No, they'll send you actually to go and learn their language. And the exact level of language, they feel like, we're now secure with this person that now we can call him one of us.
Nicho chene kyokobye.
Nekyo.
Kubanga okwogera olulimi lwaife nekitufuula kyetuli. Nze ninza okukoba bandogeza olujamani. Butinga nina okwega olujamani mbe mu Germany. Ayembeera gyembisa mu kwega olujamani tinangu. Era omuntu yena ali kwida mu Germany. Ayina okiteganda bana aba Germany bendwege olujamani. Ng'olujja kuba mu Germany. Ate ekisinga okukuniiza nti nibo wega olulimi toyidda kuba nibo. Kubanga nze waliwo era ndi n'omu Germany nga tuli kwogera. Nga ndi kwogera n'omu Germany mu lujamani. Mu Germany yaida. Yandagana yakyusa yayogera ki oluzungu ninze nga iditi nze tidiki lujamani namwira mu lusoga kai yako ati titegera olulimi lw'olusoga yayomba mutategera olusoga namukati n'ensonga lwaki ndogeire nemwino olujamani iwe yayogera ninze oluzungu nze tidiki luzungu so yogera oluzungu ndogera olusoga nekyo era nguboli musoga ng'olidi ojja kuddeme mu Germany amazima gali gati ego olulimi olusoga olusigaze oli bwaidda nga akumantaliraku ng'olwiramu mu lusoga yakuvaako.
Actually, I don't know if you guys were here in the studio, you would see the face expression, you could see the vibe when you see the happiness when really my friends here are speaking their languages. Actually, I have to go back also. I'm going home. So, listen to this. Kanze kyensobola okugamba mu byonna tubikole okuyiga ennimi endala kikulu kirungi nnyo naye sobola okulaba tusooke tunyweze ekyewaka sooka onyweze ekikyo then otandikira awo okoyongereza ku kikyo ky'olidde ky'oyina wano ntegeeza ki kati bw'oba omusajja musoga nga musajja wange otako asooka na lusoga then ennimi endala ne zijja era ng'omujamani bw'akola era ne mu ssomero nze nkola mu ssomero basooka lulimi lwabwe olujamani then ennimi endala ne zijja. That's why tukozesa ekigambo kye bayita foreign languages kubanga basooka kyabwe then ebirala biri foreign. That's the meaning of the word, because if it was their first language, that's why it's first language, mother language. So ekimbadde nsaba nti kibeere kikulu nnyo. Ate buno obubaka bwensembayo njagala mbusindikire baganda bange bonna bannayuganda abafirika abawulira kyenjogera essaawa zino nti tufube okulaba tukola tulina families tutandise families abalina abaana balina baki bannaye tufe okulaba nga tubayigiriza ebintu ebiva ewaffe ewaka ate tetubayigiriza babitereke mu kisenge naye bagenda mu ssomero naye babasama mupiira naye babakuba piano naye babakola ki balage bannaabwe abalala nti bannaye nze no taata wange ye matovu era ewaffe twogera luno olulimi taata wange afumba akawunga n'amayido ate biwooma nnyo bino pizza mbirya nate taata waafumba amayido kirala ne Uganda waka we waffe. So kati kansembeyo bwenti kati nkusibire tu mwana wange teweerabiranga gy'osibuka n'oliba ogenzeeyo ku Bulaya ojjukiranga olulimi olwaffe Oluganda olwagale olwagazise n'abato abaliddawo sanji mwana wange yensibuko yaffe neyanzenge. Vielen Dank.
Yeah, webale nnyo. Thank you so much. Our dear listeners, you have had a taste of some of the Ugandan East African languages. So I'm really happy to always have you every week, and thank you for always following us on this wonderful podcast. It has been me, Otako, your host on the wonderful podcast, and
Edwin Matovu.
And Timothy Patrick Ofono.
Yeah, wonderful. Today I had Ofono and Matovu as my guests, and we talked about language. In our next segment, we are going to talk about how colonialism used the language to really put our languages down. In the next segment, if you would like to listen to that, follow us again next week, same time. Thank you for always supporting the Hear My True Story podcast.
We not only have voices for a podcast, but also faces for YouTube. Don't miss your next episode. Hear My True Story.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Music by Edwin Matovo, hosted and produced by Otako. Subscribe to our podcast for more stories and visit us on our website, hearmytruestory.com, for more stories. All the links are listed in the show notes of this podcast.